Buddies, let's talk about Autism Speaks. Plenty of people have talked about this and explained it. I'm going to put my 2 cents in. It's just my 2 cents. I highly encourage you to listen to as many voices about Autism Speaks as possible. And I also encourage you to seek out the voices of actually autistic people. I believe those voices are more important than any other voices in this conversation. They're called Autism Speaks, but they don't seem to like it when we do. So Autism Speaks is a group that was started by two conservative grandparents of an autistic person. They are not autistic. And from the get-go, you could tell by the name of the group, they really focused on one section of the autism community, those of us who can't speak. They fundraise, they collect and distribute resources, and they do a lot of lobbying. And they completely dominate the world of autism. Meaning if you need resources, they're kind of the only ones. They dominate that sphere. And for a long time, they were sort of the gatekeepers of resources for the autistic community. You can sort of trace the discourse and the of it all by one video that was released many years ago titled I Am Autism. I'm not going to show it here. You can go to YouTube. You can probably, on any social media network at this point, type in Autism Speaks, I Am Autism, and see that horrible video. What that does is treat autism as if it is a horrible disease, which it is not. Yes, it is a disability. But what us autistic people have been screaming for so long is that you can't separate who I am from autism. It is the core of who I am. Pause for a moment and think about the traits that you have, especially the personality traits. How would you feel if someone treated those traits as a disease, as some evil, leering demon? Autism is just a collection of traits. In that video, and that group dehumanized us and centered the biggest issue with being an autistic person in our current society, which is feeling like a burden. Now, if you're a Star Wars nerd and you know your Star Wars history, you know that at the beginning of the rebellion against the Empire, there was a lot of different little rebel groups that eventually all came together. That's essentially what the I Am Autism video did for the self-advocacy movement and eventually for the neurodivergent movement. What it did was bring a lot of people together to fight the BS that video represented. And then people started looking into Autism Speaks. One of the first things we found was where the money goes. A very small percentage of the money that Autism Speaks raises goes to actually helping autistic people, and especially even smaller to autistic adults who have always been just left out of the conversation and left and hung out to dry as soon as we become adults. And a large amount of that goes to paying salaries, research for a cure, which most of us don't think is worth the time or the money because we don't think it's curable. And also a lot of investment into ABA therapy, which most survivors consider abuse. And what I've observed is the biggest issue was that search for the cure. That is fundamentally fucked up. There's no such thing. It's a waste of money and resources that instead of trying to use that money to cure us from being ourselves, you could help us get more accommodations and more resources and treatment and educating the rest of the world who's not autistic. Everyone should understand deeply what autism is. That's the only way you're ever going to make it a safe, inclusive world for us. And right now it's not. It's not safe. It's not inclusive. About 2/3 of us can speak, and about 1/3 of us are hyperverbal. And even those of us who can't speak can communicate and advocate in other ways. One of the causes of the big divide between Autism Speaks and autism moms and autistic adults is the belief that we, as autistic people, are better advocates for those of us who can't communicate in the way that we can, better than neurotypicals and allistics, even caregivers. Ideally, we'd work together. I just don't see that happening until that truth is recognized. We have an autistic experience. If you don't have the experience of being autistic, you should not be dominating the conversation. And that leads to what I think the biggest problem with Autism Speaks is they constantly speak over us who's on their board. It should mostly be autistic people. It's not. And they've historically had problems with treating autistic people poorly. Look, it's a hard situation and it's a hard thing that's going on because most people who ask me for my opinion on Autism Speaks or for me to explain, because I'm pretty good at explaining shit sometimes, most of them are parents and they're wanting to know why so many autistic people are saying, don't do ABA therapy, don't do Autism Speaks, when those are the only resources being offered. Just like a lot of socialists will say there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. The same applies here. I think what a lot of socialists mean when they say that is like, there's no way to defeat it while you're in it, so just like use what's available. But do it in a way that is as ethical as you can possibly be without robbing yourself of resources. So that's my advice for parents. And while you're doing that, listen. Listen and don't speak back. Ask questions. But don't speak over us. Listen. And listen to people who disagree with us, who are autistic. And amplify our voices. And it's going to be a slog. It's going to be a slow grind. But look, we've come a very long way. You're listening to an autistic person speak about this right now. It's a really fucking good thing. We'll get there. It's going to take time. And the hardest part about all of this, about the irony of this self-advocate movement, is that we have a really hard time communicating socially. So everyone's going to have to be patient. Everyone's going to have to be kind and practice empathy. I hope you have a badass day, and I love you.